Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Outdoor Hospitality Weekly. I'm Alex Burkett, joined as always by Matt Whittemore, and we both have an incredibly special guest and special guy to both of us today. Matt, you really were the one to introduce me to Sam and his wealth of knowledge. Why don't you give us a little bit of intro on Sam, and as we dive into a conversation with him around his experience and background at Getaway and all that he brings to the industry.
Yeah, super excited. Thanks, Alex. Was fortunate to meet Sam a few years back. Collaborated on some campground business. Learned a ton from Sam. Still learn a ton from Sam every time we speak. And fortunate to now be diving into a development project with Sam, and long overdue to do some content together. Today, some opportune time in terms of some big outdoor hospitality industry news. We'll talk about that in a minute, but first, we've got Sam Morton, and Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for hosting me, and these podcasts are starting to pile up now. But they're fun. So go by Sam Morton. I think most common story that I kind of share with people is that I was a ground floor employee at Getaway. I started with them in early 2016, just about after the first cabin was built, and right before the first scalable location was built. And I worked with Getaway for those pretty early formative years. As this kind of outdoor hospitality space, in particular, the campground development model with some higher amenity and programming was really starting to define itself and take shape. And I spent 5 years with Getaway and helped them grow on the real estate and development team, and essentially was a construction project manager and managed a litany of locations and development practices, both internal and on site. Excited to dive into the questions you guys have and share my experiences and how they've translated post Getaway as I transitioned into my own businesses. So
awesome. Yeah, super excited, Sam. So it seems like you're like me in that you still call it Getaway. You haven't adopted the Postcard Cabins name yet.
So this is not it's not me being stubborn. It's not I'm not trying to revolt or rebel against the name change. I actually think it's a unique name change, and the messaging behind it is pretty spot on, which has always been one of Getaway's like core competencies and strengths. No, I call it Getaway because that's all I've ever known it by. And the name change happened so recently, and I've been away from the company now for just over 3 years, so it's going to take a lot of time and corrections for me to actually remember that the name is now Postcard Cabins.
So Sam, as you kind of alluded to in your background, you've obviously had a career before Getaway, and I don't believe your sort of education or background is sort of from this space. So my question is, did you have any construction experience prior to joining Getaway, and how easy was that transition in pulling other skills from other roles into the position?
Yeah. So that was a very nice question. I'll give you the honest answer here. No, my education had nothing to do with this. I actually went to a fine art school. I studied painting and printmaking, which obviously was a passion of mine, but it just wasn't in the cards for me to kind of pursue it professionally. So, I got into this somewhat indirectly, but it just so happens that building properties or developing of this nature, which takes a lot of creativity, forward thinking, planning, it shares a lot of common threads with the fine art world, and some of the stuff that I was doing prior to that. As a graduate of fine arts coming out of school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, which most of us did. Most of us were in that boat. You kind of do a lot of different things. So jack of all trades, master of none. The way I kind of fell into this was just right place, right time. Right before I started this, I was actually doing some level of project management, but it was more on a brand level, and it was more on kind of a setting up, machining and shop for architectural lighting. So it was a much smaller scale, and it was much more kind of intimate detail, kind of like benchtop scale and size. Versus this, which you zoom out, and I mean we're talking about sometimes 400 acres. So, yeah. I think like in any aspect of life, your learnings, your education, your experiences, you can extract, those moments or those learnings from, your path and apply them, towards your future. I think it's pretty important that a lot of people understand that it's not necessarily the field you go into, but it's how you apply the skills that you've acquired and learned to new things. So in this case, it was, just being open-minded, learning, hard work, determination, long hours, but understanding that I didn't know what I didn't know, and in order to know it, I had to go learn it. So
Love it. I don't think we've ever actually talked about it, but I think there was a year of overlap. I was right next door to Mass Art at Wentworth.
Yeah.
So too funny.
Yeah. Right on
Did
Huntington
you?
Ave.
Yeah. Did you know you wanted to get into construction, or did it just kind of fall in your lap, or what? How did that all happen?
No, it's I might actually like reframe your question with my answer. Um, not to kind of beat up the question,
Hey,
but
go for it.
I still don't even know that I really consider what I'm doing specifically construction. Like,
Fair.
what we're kind of building is, well, first and foremost, it's not like, the rinse and repeat models. We're not building Holiday Inn Express where, it's a very scientific formula, and you're never going to get some variation. They have everything mapped and formulaic, down to the light switches. So, in this case, like what we're doing is very unique, case by case, and it's also, it stretches beyond just the physical aspects of moving earth and building up and driving nails, and um, it we really come in with the development process and trying to also wrap that around what the developer or the the owner or the whoever's working on this, wrapping that around their concept. And so these things are getting developed tandemly. One can't live without the other, and vice versa. Like, they inform each other as you kind of progress. So I think like I look back and I'm like, yeah, I built a lot of stuff. And I should correct myself. I've managed the construction of a lot of stuff. I've been in the field. I've got my boots dirty, but the reality is, the process starts much earlier. The process is much kind of broader. Starting with the idea, conceptualizing that, but ideating it as well, kind of going through these different iterations of how you can kind of evolve, pivot, and then getting to that moment or that milestone where you can actually begin construction, and that's when you start to really see the formative realization.
So Sam, go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, did the outdoorsy kind of aspect, did that draw you in, or?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, first and foremost, I think where I grew up has a lot to do with kind of the being in this specific space. From Maine, representing it right now, and born and raised here, moved back here. My wife and I live here now, and Maine being kind of one of those iconic destination states known for its outdoors, adventure, and just honestly being I believe it's the only national park on the East Coast, or at least in the Northeast. So we were kind of born into it, and it's embedded in sort of the fabric of our DNA. I had zero interest in building anything that didn't at least pay homage or incorporate the elements of like being outdoors or nature, or celebrating it. So yeah, it also gives you the opportunity to spread out. It can be very daunting when you have to kind of compress and build within a very confined space, and now you're talking about margins of error that are within eighths of an inch, sixteenths of an inch, versus in large acreage development we're talking about margins of error that could be feet, and so there's a little bit more. It's a bigger sandbox, more room to play, yeah. Not to mention, like it really takes you to some beautiful places. I've had the opportunity and the privilege to travel, honestly, most of this country for work, whether it was scouting sites, selecting them, due diligence, feasibility, obviously constructing, spending, and not just like traveling, but spending time there. There were moments during Getaway where I was actually living on site while it was being built, and got to see and really get initiated into the local community there. So, but it always felt a little bit at home because I come from small town and, in a sparsely populated state. So, a lot of these areas, like, I could relate.
Love it.
Yeah.
So Sam, take us back to the start of joining Getaway. What was the state of the company at that point? How many
Sure.
locations were in development? Kind of how early in the process were you, and was that really daunting to be there kind of towards the beginning with an unsure, unplanned path ahead?
Yeah, I'll answer the first part of your question. So I came in when they had finished, or they were under construction on the third cabin. So there were two built prior, which, I believe it was Ovida and Lorraine, the two cabins. And for those who don't know, Getaway named cabins after, grandparents or special family members. It started off with just employees, but then it grew obviously to customers because you only have so many grandparents you can choose from. So, I came in on the third cabin while it was under construction. That was Maisie. And these 3 cabins were originally just up in New Hampshire at individual locations, each one. So they were not together. They weren't at the same location that was a getaway designated campground, or the property was 3 properties owned by 3 different people. So there was a little bit of challenge there. Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of different circumstances, and there's more voices in that process. But Getaway, when I came in, was under. They were essentially negotiating to buy their first property, which they would then scale into their first, first development that most people know Getaway as today, which is essentially a campground or a getaway location with multiple cabins that are kind of thoughtfully planned out and spaced out. So, and that first location was in the Catskills, and that location has since been kind of replaced by other Catskill locations. But spent a lot of time there, and so third cabin before the first location, really. If you don't count the initial sort of random New Hampshire ones, and then I was also the second hire, and I should say second full-time hire. There were a few people there who were kind of working on internships, summer internships, but I was the second full-time hire. What was the second part of your question, Alex? Apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Just kind of early in that state, right? Feeling that sort of uncertainty or uneasiness about the path ahead, right? Was that challenging to sort of navigate that? And right, you were essentially in charge of how the development came to be.
Well, yeah, I would say, any startup, it innately breeds unpredictability and just that, what is going to happen, kind of mentality. But there was the cool thing about Getaway, especially in the early days, was that everyone was in kind of the same position of look, this is only going to happen if we're all kind of we're all in, we're all committed. Everyone's going to be responsible for kind of doing everything. And, I remember in those early days, especially when we were building Catskill, there was 5 of us who moved to that property in the summer. And we all slept under the same roof. So, me, John Staff, Pete Davis, Sarah Relo, Jake Bahanko, and a few other people who kind of came in and out, but we all slept there. The conference table was one of those plastic fold-up tables you got at Walmart. We'd have morning meetings there, and meanwhile, after the day's over, we're all fighting for the shower, or and and at a certain point, most of the crew left because they had to go focus on the company in other ways, and I focused on continuing to build out Catskill, but additionally running some management stuff there. We, again, early days, everyone was responsible for everything. There were kind of no titles, because you couldn't be just one thing. You had to wear many hats. So we also there was no money, which ask any startup, that's a scary feeling. We knew that we were building to raise. We knew that it was in good hands with John. John would absolutely, if he had the right team and the right product to kind of show, he could pitch it. And so What we didn't realize was the, kind of the opportunity that was lurking, which was Shark Tank, and of course that kind of spiraled offers to grow and escalate, not just in quantity but in size. So, but yeah, it really was an uncertain time, but also sometimes those are kind of the most fun. It's like, I don't know, kind of brings you back to like college when you're like, your first apartment, you're not living in the dorms, and you have to like figure out how to get this done while going to school and paying your rent. And it's just like this group of people who were working on this really amazing idea that was trailblazing, because it really was kind of the start of this movement. And, you just had to kind of come together and kind of trust each other.
That's awesome. Really special. So just to kind of catch everybody up, we're talking about Postcard Cabins, formerly Getaway House, 29 locations across the country, 1,200 cabins. We've kind of dove into, Sam's background as a ground floor employee there and growing it from the first location. And for anybody who's not, well acquainted with outdoor hospitality, glamping, camping, it's kind of basically a household name at this point. Was announced this morning that Marriott International acquired the brand. So super exciting news, big news for the industry. It has been for a few years an industry where there's tons of buzz, tons of activity, private equity, now public markets getting involved, public companies. Something I wanted to ask you, Sam, about is, a lot of investment companies, developers, even smaller investors, I think are really trying to emulate what Getaway did and is doing and, kind of follow their footsteps. 2016 was really early to get into this market. Did you and the team pull inspiration from anywhere? Under Canvas, I think, was founded in 2009, so they were around for a while, but different concept, safari tents. Glamping has always been, was always big in Europe, a thing much earlier in Europe. Did you guys pull inspiration from anywhere?
I mean, yeah, I know Under Canvas predates Getaway. I don't know that they like really scaled until kind of the Getaway.
Well, it's only 13 locations today, right. So
and I think like their product evolved over time. I know in the early days of Getaway, Tenter was also kind of a big thing, which is no longer around. But as far as the inspo, like drawing, from like businesses or like concepts, there wasn't a ton to really borrow from or even, get inspired by. I think like it's always been Getaway's vision, which is essentially to reconnect with nature. And I keep saying Getaway, I do mean Postcard Cabins. Was to reconnect with nature, and the mission was to build out these outposts and provide cabins and infrastructure that would allow them to do so. That was always the inspiration, was how could we take seemingly pass by sites or locations and transform them into destinations that give people that opportunity to decompress, reconnect, have those moments, in kind of time and space where they can slow down and kind of get away from fast pace or daily stresses. So I think like obviously when I came in, I was subscribing to the idea, and not necessarily helping the Postcard Cabins develop it further. Like it was pretty fleshed out. But I think over time, like we kind of saw how the space was evolving, and obviously there was adaptation, to make sure that we're hitting the marks on the guest experience and product offering and whatnot. So I would say like the inspiration was always, land based, team based, like relying on each other, trusting each other, and obviously the cabins have evolved over time too. So we wanted to be able to deliver the best thing to a lot of people. So we were very, very careful about how we went about making sure that things were built properly, but also expeditiously. So.
And Sam, as the company was sort of in this scaling process, how many projects would you say it took to really understand that you knew what you were doing, or at least had the sense that things were becoming more repeatable or dependable?
I mean, like I would say in the first one, like, I think your question might be like, if I'm getting it correctly, like as it relates to the project management process in development, like when did I feel like I kind of picked up, the professional cues and the lingo and the I know what I'm doing in this space and replicate it outside of Getaway or Postcard Cabins. I think that took more time. Could I go in and put it together? A little duct tape, elbow grease. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like, look, I think most early Getaway people will admit, like, that's what we had to do. Like we were a bunch of people with an idea trying to execute it and learning on the go. So, not everything was perfect. It was probably, a couple years in where like we got a little bit bigger, team got bigger, we started to implement more processes, brought in talent that actually had background in this space. Not in this space, but in just like construction management and project management in particular. Obviously learning from those people was pretty key. But again, like a lot of people at Early Getaway, now Postcard Cabins, were self-taught. So, we relied on sort of our intuition, our gut, but also like the day wasn't over after the day was over. We'd go home, we'd research, we'd kind of, we'd talk to people. Again, going back to like kind of when you guys introduced me, I took pride in knowing that I didn't know everything. And so I, made it a point of reference to learn.
Love that. And that, I was super interested to hear your answer to that question because, it's just interesting to me that you have the art background that definitely shines through, like your creativity. It comes through in your work, but also you just have a really great skill set for project management. You're very organized. You're on top of things. You're,
I had to learn that.
And it's funny, like I don't like not to stereotype about like people with like art degrees or backgrounds or whatever. Like you don't normally think of like someone with an art background that's like, I don't know if you're necessarily type A, but like you're super organized. You're on top of things.
I mean,
you're just
a lot of artists are slobs and they're messy. It's the stereotype. Listen, there's truth in everyone. So like I would, yeah. And by the way, I had to learn how to be organized. It wasn't a like instant thing. Like you start building things that cost millions of dollars, and that you can't see the end of it, right? Like I'm standing at one end of the development, and it would take me 15 minutes to drive to the other. So like when you don't have the full vision in front of you, you only have slices of the pie. Like you have to be organized. And trust me when I say this, like it took me some time to figure out that, like, oh, I got to write things down, or I got to store this file, or I've got to mark this up, and naming files and file convention and storage and all that stuff. Like super important. Communication too. Like I think a lot of people just assume organization is your desktop. And it's there's organization and communication as well. How you communicate with people, tone, flexion, kind of character. These things all matter, and it just making sure that you're following up. Like I texted this person that I would send them an email. I gotta send them an email. So
love it. We touched on the scale, and that's always what jumps out at me about Getaway Postcard Cabins is the scale is impressive. The pace at which you guys grew the company is impressive. I mean, did you just feel like you were strapped to like a rocket ship the entire time? What was that like?
Yeah. It's an interesting question because it's got a couple answers. So early Getaway, like everyone was hustling for that first fundraise. And that was the milestone that we were working towards. And look, we all knew that we wanted it. The first fundraise was meant to be there to grow it beyond what we raised. But I think a lot of, that first tranche of money, that first Series A came in, took a while to get. We were working for a long time kind of on seed rounds and angel investors, and it was budgets were very, very tight, and like we were but so once that Series A came in, it was almost like a sigh of relief. Well, now we can kind of take a second, collect ourselves. Well, no, that's actually the point when we decided to like ramp it up. And so I don't think we fully understood like how fast we wanted to grow kind of early on. I just remember specifically going from Catskill to the second location, which was, serve the Boston market in New Hampshire. And, we were very kind of methodical about building it out, and, we'll start with a few cabins, we'll add a couple more. And I remember kind of getting to that like 10 cabin mark and like, yeah, it's gonna be good, right? Like we're like, no. And then we got to 14, and then we got to 20, and then we added, then we kind of maxed out the area that the existing campground. And now we're talking about like, okay, let's go out back and let's build out this whole back area now. And so that kind of opened my eyes. It was that second location where I'm like, okay, all right, well, we're full steam ahead now. And then I went to, from New Hampshire, I went to the Getaway Chattahoochee, which is in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, served the Atlanta market. It's in the Appalachian Mountains in northern Georgia, near Dahlonega. And, from the Atlanta property, where did I go next? I went to Shenandoah. From there, I went to, I think it was Pittsburgh, Cleveland, which was in Ohio. Yeah, I mean, I could like sit here and think about kind of like where I popped around, but the scale at which we grew and the speed and the efficiency was very intense. There's no doubt about it. But we had a responsibility, right? We were raising money. We were very smart about the raises, and we had to get this product out to more people. And our real estate team was pumping sites to us, and marketing team was ready to sell it, and operations team had solid customer service, and they were building out outpost teams with standard operating procedures. So it was on our construction team to really we had to deliver more sites, built out sites.
So Sam, obviously, as you're going through this, right, there's a lot of pace and intensity, and I'm sure a lot of learnings that you can get coming out of this experience. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons you learned as a hospitality developer?
Man,
not to toss you a loaded one.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I have a different answer every day of the week. So, look, I think first and foremost, developments of this size, of this character, of this nature, of this, in this space, take team efforts. And there's always people who know a little bit more, but and there were definitely a lot of people who knew more than me. I think to do this effectively, it's always good to find experts who know what they're doing and learn from them. But in addition to that, I think it's important to trust that you're probably not always the best resource, and putting your trust in other people is going to take you a little bit further. And sometimes I understand. I'm sure a lot of people will say, "Well, that's burned me in the past," and I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, it burns a lot of people. It does happen. You choose the wrong people, and surround yourself with the wrong advice." But I will tell you right now, you try to do it by yourself, you're going to be saying the same thing. So, I think, obviously trusting your team, building the right camaraderie and team spirit. I would say admitting to yourself when you don't know something, and not trying to fake your way through it. There are some big consequences to trying to fake large construction. And so, if you don't know, ask. And, I think this is just kind of maybe generic advice, but obviously Postcard Cabins, I've been in this space now, and I've kind of expanded into developing a range of different hospitality spaces, and not just outdoor hotels or glamping, kind of like Postcard Cabins, but also resorts and hotels and motels and food and beverage, and down to campgrounds as well. So ranging from anywhere from 2 million to 50 million. I just think that it's okay to admit that you want to emulate sort of very successful models or successful brand vision, or and kind of tweak it in your own vision. It's a lot of the proven ones are proven for a reason. So I see a lot of people trying to reinvent the wheel, like kind of the Getaway and auto camps that kind of originally forged this or trailblazed this path. It's going to be very difficult to kind of to reinvent hospitality in a new light. I think most of you're starting to see a lot of these terms getting thrown out, outdoor event or outdoor hotel, adventure hospitality, landscape hotel, glamping. They all kind of mean the same thing. And I think a lot of it has to do with your relationship with your guest, your relationship with your development. But it's okay that you're kind of your shared model with, other people. So I guess my advice would be like, don't try to be unique for the sake of being unique. Like you can, in the end, there is a goal to make money at this, and that should also be an important factor. So I think that gets lost in a lot of these conversations. Like, oh, this is only about the guest experience, or this is only about the uniqueness of this property. It's like, well, no, you have to be a business too, and for this business to succeed, you have to carefully budget, and you have to carefully spend, and you have to model it appropriately. So, like, you can't just go full blown unique and expensive, and then not have the guests, or you can't just focus everything on your experience there and then not think about how to appropriately build it. So that's where we can help. That's we come in with a very logistical and but also creative and problem solving, kind of mind oriented solutions. We've seen it all. So
Love that. And you kind of went down the path of what our next question was going to be, but I'd love for you to just give a more direct plug for what you've been up to.
Sure.
The last couple of years. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I'll start by saying that I've got a couple of things going on. First off,
just a few.
I'll start by saying, me and two other partners started a company called Topos Ventures. It's our development company. We kind of work all over the country, but we work on our own projects with select operators to kind of develop these hospitality projects. So that's happening, but more importantly, and for our purpose here, I started SomaBuild, which is my project management firm. We do a little bit more than that. It's not just project management. We're also advisors. We're also strategists. We're pretty well versed in this like end-to-end development process. So, I left Postcard Cabins and immediately started SomaBuild. I didn't realize what I was starting when I started it. I thought I was just kind of starting I'll just do this kind of part-time until I figure out the next step. Just kind of spiraled into something bigger. And so now, it is a full-time thing. And essentially what we do is provide development expertise to owners or developers with ideas in the outdoor, but also like outdoor adjacent hospitality space. I think it's an ever evolving term, and like no one can really actually appropriately define it anymore. Hospitality is hospitality. Outdoors just kind of the moniker, right? Like we're just branding it with like, oh yeah, well, you're in nature. But the reality is, I think, nature is kind of part of hospitality. And we like to try to focus on those elements of like spatiality and, not trying to get into anything too compressed, angular, modular, dense and dirty. We love to spread out. We love to explore, how space can create kind of cool moments. It's not just outdoor hospitality. We work on all types of hospitality projects. I'm working on a bar and restaurant in Joshua Tree right now that will inevitably have an event space. We've, consulted on a number of different like large scale resorts. So we SomaBuild is a resource for developers. We're experts in this space. We know how to budget. We know how to schedule. We have an extensive network of consultants and sub-consultants, both in the planning and pre-con phases, but as well as the general contracting and construction phases. We, we come to the table with years of experience and know how entitlements work and, permitting. And I think most importantly, we've done it in the hardest to build states, which is it's just like a kind of an overlooked credential in this space. Obviously, there are states that perform better in the hospitality world than others. California, New York, Texas, being some of the few. Those hard to build states, California, New York, if you know how to build, if you know how to plan and build in those states, you can succeed anywhere.
Love it.
And yeah. So
love it. And I honestly, I have to concur. I'm a repeat client myself, and happy one at that. Sam, you've been my first call for anything development or construction related for the last 3 years now, honestly. And it's been awesome to have that as a resource. So
likewise, it's been fun working with you.
Yeah, man, appreciate that.
Awesome.
So yeah, as we start to wrap up here, just to sort of bring the conversation full circle, Sam, how do you see the Getaway Postcard Cabin acquisition as a signal within the hospitality industry, and what does that next chapter look like?
No idea. Sorry.
I taught you all the hard ones today.
Yeah, man. Look, I'm excited for kind of like the evolution of the space. Obviously, it's no secret. Like the past year was tough for a lot of developers and markets in particular. So you saw a little bit of a slowdown. And obviously things are starting to pick back up, and we'll see how long it takes. But I think Alex, I'm better off not knowing.
Right.
I like that.
I really love, like, look, I'm not going to try to pretend to be either. I'm never going to be the person who's going to kind of define kind of a new aspect of this space or reinvent it. My goal is always to be a resource to those people who have brilliant ideas. In the end, right? Like I do develop separate from helping other developers, but we want to be flexible enough so that we can kind of evolve with the space as it moves forward. And no doubt, Postcard Cabins, obviously partnering or being acquired by Marriott now, will succeed. It's a fantastic match. More specifically, like Getaway Postcard Cabins now has the ability to go global pretty quickly, and not just the US.
Amazing.
So, but for my purposes, like, man, I'm just here for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, so this news is pretty fresh off the press. We don't really have any details on anything, but I got to imagine for you personally, Sam, it's got to be rewarding, financials aside, money aside. It's got to be rewarding for you. Some validation, for all that hard work.
Yeah,
imagine that's a pretty awesome feeling. Can you give us a word or two about that?
Yeah, it is. When you kind of look back at it was hard. It was hard work. When you look back and you're like, okay, one of the biggest hotel company in the world, came in and saw enough value in what the team did, and obviously those early formative years were pretty critical to the whole success of Getaway. So I am proud of that fact. Obviously, I reached out to a bunch of people. There was a lot of us early on who kind of went through the trenches together. So just congratulating them, making sure they knew that I was thinking about them and recognizing their efforts. And I'm sure we'll get more details. It'll come through. But I've told this story a couple of times, not too many, but like the greatest value I got out of Getaway, obviously I got a paycheck, I got all the benefits, whatever. The most value I ever got out of Getaway was for free business school. Essentially, like I got paid to go learn how to develop this stuff on a pretty rapid scale, and it wasn't just how to develop this stuff. It was also like, how does this whole industry work? So it's not just like I've got a concept and I want to build it and I need an engineer. You got to raise money and you've got to model it and you've got to develop a brand and messaging and you've got to build a team and like all these components that have to come together. So I count myself lucky. I got paid to learn that. So
awesome, man. Congrats to you. Congrats to the whole team. Really exciting news for the whole industry.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And obviously, looking forward to working with you guys in the future.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Sam, for being here. Appreciate everybody for listening and hope you found this story really compelling and valuable, as I'm sure we all did on this conversation. So appreciate everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next week for another great show.
I guess before we sign off, actually, Sam, for people who do need a development expert, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to our website, SomaBuild.com. There's a few contact forms there that you can reach out to us using. We have a developer form on our website as well if you want to reach out, give us a little bit of information about your project, your idea, or you just want to have a chat. Also Samuel@SomaBuild.com or info@SomaBuild.com. But yeah, we want to hear from you. We planned and built quite a few things, and looking forward to hopefully working with a lot of you in the future.
Love it. And that's SomaBuild, SomaBuild.com.
Yep.
So thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it, guys.